How are you guys doing? Today is Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on Jonathan Taylor. The elite starting running back for the Indianapolis Colts turns 22 today, and my intention with this episode is, of course, to point out how Jonathan Taylor has impacted the game on a micro level, game in and game out, and how he's impacted the NFL at a micro level in a league where you have hundreds of thousands of people competing for a few thousand, if that, slots in the NFL. And not only that, to be a player that established yourself as the best player in his position. Even while Derrick Henry was out, that's still an impressive season. That is an elite season, and I think it's worth noting, especially considering the trajectory that Jonathan Taylor has been on. This dude has been amazing, and I don't think there's not much left for him to prove at this point, and he's already only 23. So just to give you a little bit of background, he stands at about 5'10". He's 226 pounds. The best way I would kind of describe his game is he's a little bowling ball-esque. I would say a little Adrian Peterson prototype. He has very long legs that can run incredibly fast, but he's incredibly big and compact and strong, and he actually knows what he's doing when he's running. He's not just a bowling ball of brute force. He's actually very graceful on his feet, and he knows very well what he's doing. Not to mention that he can also catch the ball and run in open space. And add on to the fact that he's hard to tackle and he's a great open field runner, I think you kind of get the picture right there. He's originally from Salem, New Jersey. He would go on to play high school football in New Jersey, which of course is which is very intense. He originally committed to play college football at Rutgers after being ranked as a 3-star prospect in his class. He would eventually flip his commitment to go play at the University of Wisconsin. And once he got to Wisconsin, he would hit the ground running. His freshman season would be his age 18 season, and in his very first year with the team in 2017, he would go on to earn his way into the starting spot right before the season started, as he really turned a lot of heads in summer camp. He would go on to play 14 games in a season where Wisconsin would finish with a 13-1 record. They would finish as the 6th ranked team in the nation according to the coaches poll. They were 7th according to the AP. They would go all the way to the Orange Bowl, where they would go on to beat Miami by 10. But of course, in his season, Jonathan Taylor would go on to finish with almost 300 carries for 1,977 rushing yards. He would go on to break the NCAA freshman rushing record. He would also go on to tie Emmitt Smith and Marshall Faulk, Adrian Peterson, Jamario Thomas, and P.J. Hill for the fewest games to reach 1,000 yards, in which he did so in his 7th game. He would go on to lead the Big Ten in rushing yards as a freshman, and he finished 3rd in the entire country in rushing. And in the Orange Bowl himself, he would go on to rush for 130 yards, being the team's hero. At the conclusion of the 2017 season, he was named a consensus All-Big Ten first-team player. He was the Big Ten Freshman of the Year and the AP Big Ten Newcomer of the Year, just off of his very first season there. He would return for his sophomore season, obviously, because he wouldn't be NFL eligible. And his age 19 season in 2018, he will go on to play 13 games for a Wisconsin Badgers team that would finish 8-5. They will go all the way to the Pinstripe Bowl after finishing the season unranked, and they will go on to beat Miami 35-3 in that bowl game. Looking at Jonathan Taylor fared in the season itself, on the regular season, he finished with 307 carries for 2,194 yards, which is the most rushing yards he put together in a season, and the second time he eclipsed 1,900 as a running back. He would finish with 16 yards on the ground, or 16 touchdowns on the ground. Not to mention he had 6 receiving yards through the air. This would be the second straight season he had over 2,000 yards from scrimmage and double-digit touchdowns. Even though Wisconsin would not finish ranked, he would go into the Pinstripe Bowl and finish with 205 rushing yards, and he had a rushing touchdown to help the Badgers win. But following the 2018 season, Jonathan Taylor would be named a consensus All Big Ten first team player for the second year in a row. He was named the Big Ten Running Back of the Year. He was given the Doak Walker Award, which is given to the best collegiate running back, for the first time, and he was named a unanimous All-American for the very first time in his collegiate football career as well. And this was after Wisconsin wasn't ranked. This would lead into Jonathan Taylor's third and final season as a college running back with Wisconsin. In his age 20 season in 2019, he would go on to start 14 games for a Wisconsin Badgers team that would finish 10-4 under Paul Christ. They would go on to win their division itself, as they would go on to finish second, runners-up in the Big Ten. Wisconsin would finish the season with a 10-4 record, as they finished the season as the 11th ranked team in the nation. They would face off against Oregon in the Rose Bowl, and they would end up losing that matchup by a point in that game. But looking at how Jonathan Taylor fared in his junior year, he would finish with 320 carries, a career high, for 2,003 rushing yards, making it the second straight year he's had at least 2,000 rushing yards. And the third season he's had at least 1,900, which is still an incredible amount of rushing yards. He had 21 rushing touchdowns on the ground, which is the most rushing touchdowns he had in a season at Wisconsin. He would go on to combine for 50 rushing touchdowns over his 3 seasons. He would go on to finish with 252 receiving yards and 5 additional receiving touchdowns. So at the end of the year, he finished with 2,255 total yards from scrimmage, 1 more yard from scrimmage than he had his sophomore year. And he had 10 more touchdowns, as he had 26 total touchdowns on the year. At the conclusion of the 2019 season, Jonathan Taylor was, of course, named a Big Ten first-team player for the third year in a row. Consensus, by the way. He was named the Big Ten Running Back of the Year for the second year in a row. He was given the Doak Walker Award, which is the best running back in football, for the second year in a row, and he was named a unanimous All-American for the second year in a row as well. Following his 3-year stint at Wisconsin, he would find himself getting taken with the 41st overall pick in the 2020 NFL Draft. And then, of course, just looking at who was in that draft for reference, Chase Young, the elite defensive end for the Washington football team, was drafted out of Ohio State in that draft with the second pick. The LA Chargers selected the Oregon's elite quarterback, Justin Herbert, and he's now their starting quarterback now. Justin Jefferson was selected by the Minnesota Vikings. Not a single running back was actually taken in the first round of this draft. The first running back actually taken was DeAndre Swift. He was drafted by the Detroit Lions out of Georgia. Jonathan Taylor was the second running back taken. He and Trayvon Diggs are the only 2 players in that round that they were drafted in that have been named to all-pro teams and that have been named Pro Bowlers. Trayvon Diggs was drafted with the 51st overall pick by the Cowboys as they took him out of Alabama, just to get a sense of that how recent that 2020 draft was. Jonathan Taylor was drafted by the Indianapolis Colts, where he still is a member, and looking at what he's done so far in the league, in his age 21 season in 2020, he would have to earn the starting lineup, or he'd have to earn the starting spot behind Marlon Mack. Of course, he would earn his starting spot in a couple of games. He would start 13 of the 15 games he played in a season where the Indianapolis Colts would finish with an 11-5 record in Frank Reich's third season. They had won 4 more games than they had won the previous year. Jonathan Taylor would go on to finish with 232 carries for 1,169 yards and 11 rushing touchdowns as a rookie. Through the air, he had 36 receptions for 299 yards and a receiving touchdown. So in total, he had over 250 touches. He had 268 touches, as he had 1,468 yards from scrimmage as a rookie running back. And he would go on to finish with 12 rushing receiving touchdowns. This is when Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback as well. And at the conclusion of the 2020 season, Jonathan Taylor would, of course, be recognized as one of the better young players. He was named to the All-Rookie team. The Indianapolis Colts would make the playoffs. This is the lone time that Jonathan Taylor has made the playoffs so far in his career. And they would go on to lose their lone game in the playoffs by 3 to the Buffalo Bills, just to get a sense of how close they were. But following that season, this most recent season in the NFL was Jonathan Taylor's second season as a pro. In his age 22 season, in the very first year that the NFL would expand its regular season to 17 games for each team, he would start all 17 games for an Indianapolis Colts team that finished with a 9-8 record and just missed the playoffs by half a game, actually, as in like the Pittsburgh Steelers made it because they tied with the Lions. But in this season, Jonathan Taylor would go on to lead the NFL in rush attempts, as he had 332 of them. The very first time he would have 300. He had 100 more rushes this year than he did his rookie year. He finished with 1,811 yards, so we had almost 650 more yards on 100 more carries than he had his rookie year. He had 18 touchdowns, like I said, leading the league in all three. He also had the longest carry of the season, as he had an 83-yard carry. He led the NFL in yards per game, as he finished averaging 106.5 yards per game. And through the air, he would finish with 40 receptions for 360 yards and 2 touchdowns. He would finish with 60 more yards. I even saw one of his receiving touchdowns as he caught it in Baltimore, one of his better plays of the year. He would go on to, that was also his longest reception of the year, 76-yarder. He would finish the season with 372 touches, which is the most touches he's had in a season, 104 more than his rookie season. He would go on to lead the NFL in yards from scrimmage with 2,171, and he would go on to finish with 20 total touchdowns on the season. He would go on to end the year being named a Pro Bowler for the very first time in his career, and he was named to the first team All-Pro, being recognized as the best running back in football. I'm not going to lie, a big part of it did come with the fact that Derrick Henry got injured halfway through the season, but regardless, that doesn't take away from what Jonathan Taylor did for a full season to help the Colts at least stay in the playoff hunt for the time being, when without Jonathan Taylor, they realistically wouldn't be. But that is how well, and of course he is playing behind an incredible O-line, so I will give his offensive line a good amount of credit for that as well. But this leads us to where we are here as Jonathan Taylor turns 23. And I do think that already he has proven that he is a force that the NFL is going to have to deal with until he's no longer done. When I see him, I see flashes of Adrian Peterson, who I saw when I was growing up. And I think that Jonathan Taylor, with his demeanor and the fact that he does take incredibly good care of his body, I do think that when healthy, he is most definitely a force in the NFL. And I do think that just even simply saying that he's elite is an understatement. It's very possible that he's in the running for Offensive Player of the Year. It really can be a toss-up between him and Cooper Kupp, and even Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, because they've all had amazing seasons. But I wouldn't be surprised if Jonathan Taylor won the Offensive Player of the Year this year. And deservedly so. He's put together a masterpiece of a second professional season, and I just can't wait to see what he does between now and next year. With that said, I want to thank the Pro and College Football Reference websites, as well as the NFL and NCAA websites, for giving me all the facts and figures that I needed for this episode, even Wikipedia, because I wouldn't be able to do it without them as well. I want to thank everyone for listening to all 14 minutes of this piece. I do hope all is well. If you ever get a chance, I would recommend watching Jonathan Taylor. He wears number 28 with the Indianapolis Colts for the time being, and I know that Indianapolis Colts fans are definitely glad to have him. Once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done, I'm going to come back tomorrow on Thursday, January 20th for another episode of The Elite. So until then, thanks for listening. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with another piece tomorrow. Peace out. And not to mention that by this time next year, I will have another episode for Jonathan Taylor. So I can't wait to see what he does between this year and next. Thanks for listening. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with another episode tomorrow. Peace out.